Hey, this is Delmar Pete from Practically Pastoring, and I just want to welcome you to the Practical Conversation. That's where we talk one-on-one with pastors, and today I've driven about 3 hours upstate South Carolina to Travelers Rest, which feels like coffee and CrossFit country, to talk to one of my good friends in ministry, senior pastor of Trailside Church, Sean Gajda.
Hey, what's up?
Hey,
glad
Sean.
You're here.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here too, Sean. You were just telling me that I think you're a lot more important than you really are.
Yeah, that's 100% accurate. It's not even a think. It is a you think. Any semblance of me being important, you've decided is just way more than accurate.
See, I don't know about that, man, because we met at Charleston Southern.
Yep.
And I was just sharing with a guy who works with you. Oh, that's an amazing story you can get into if you want to. Yep. But I was just sharing with him. He's like, how did you meet Sean? And I was like, I was in youth ministry classes. And you were probably the most charismatic man in the room. And I'm going to be honest, Sean, I'm not necessarily always the most charismatic in the room, but I know that I need to be friends with him. And I think that's kind of what made me say, hey, I want to get to know this guy.
You trying to get me to buy you dinner tonight? Is that what's happening here?
Dude,
I'm getting buttered up.
You got me lunch already, so like I'm gonna go for broke here. No, but seriously, Sean, it's good. And then we met at CSU.
Yep.
And then we kind of we didn't talk for a while, and then we did.
Yeah.
And now we're sitting here today doing a podcast. If you don't know Sean, he is up here at TR. You want to tell him just kind of how you got here and?
Yeah, sure. So I was actually at North Greenville College at the time. Met my wife, and then I got kicked out of Christian school. Ended up at Charleston Southern. Enjoyed that like crazy. Went right into ministry in Charleston. And I was at a small Baptist church there for 18 months because I wanted to stick with those good statistics of how long youth pastors actually hang around. And ended up at another church for about 3.5 years. And then we had our first son and really felt like we needed to get to where we could raise him in a place we wanted to and where we felt like was home. And just knowing Charleston wasn't home for us, we moved back to Greenville, and I was on staff at a mega church for a mega Presbyterian church here in town, downtown Greenville. And then I guess 3 years ago or so, 3 years ago, I left staff to come plant Trailside Church in Travelers Rest. We planted in a little CrossFit gym for a few weeks and outgrew that, which is not as impressive as it sounds. And then we went to a middle school out in the middle of nowhere and couldn't wait to get out of there. And then just through kind of the Lord's goodness, ended up in the old City Hall building. As our town is exploding. They built a new one, and so and the Lord's been kind. We're here, and we are 2.5 years in, and doing what we can, loving Jesus well, trying to anyways.
You know, I was thinking about who do I want to be the first person we interview?
I'm the first one.
You're the first one for interview on Practically Pastoring. Yeah, you're 001, if you will, in our catalog right now.
I've never been number one in anything. This is...
Except
my wife's heart.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay. So that's a good segue. So I really was thinking, like, who should we interview? And I really was thinking, you know, Sean, I really would love to have you on because there's a couple things that really come to my mind when I think about you as a pastor, as I've watched you from afar. And the first thing is how persistent you are. Like you're very persistent. I've seen things that would shut other pastors down.
Is that code for annoying or? I know, I'm just kidding with you.
Yeah, but
you gotta take the shots.
Oh yeah, that's part of the role here. But you're persistent, and then you're honest. Because I mean, actually, last time you and I were hanging out face to face, you were on my turf. I wasn't on your turf, and I told you, Sean, I need you to come scream at a few hundred teenagers for a few hours.
Yeah,
and you crushed it. I'm telling you. So your honesty, and then the last thing that really just got me was, Sean, you're known for your wife. In a great way.
She is something else, dude. She is something else.
Like, if you can take what it means to bottle up grace and dispense it, that's your wife.
Absolutely.
Sean has a how many month old?
6-month-old now.
So literally, you became a daddy again, and then the world crashed and burned.
Yeah, 8, 5, and 6 months. So we had Gavin got to the hospital. COVID really kind of kicked up 2 weeks later. And so it was a new baby, lead a small church plant. We have about 100 to 150 people who are here on a Sunday, which that means nothing. Numbers are nothing. But try to lead, a mainly volunteer staff in the church through that with the newborn and 2 other kids who are doing schooling online. And man, teachers, you guys are incredible, because what a mess that was. But yeah, we're here.
One of the reasons we're doing the whole practically pastoring thing is, I wouldn't call it an outpouring, but you were on Download Youth Ministry with me, right?
Was.
It's a great site. Still is they're doing some good things. And one of the things we loved in there was how I can go in there and I need something practical, or I just needed to share where I was if I had a bad day, and I can just post it in there, and it generally would go to a good place. Mm-hmm. And then I, like you, we went to the other world of senior pastor role, or lead pastor, whatever you want to call it, campus pastor.
Yeah, we're super cool here, so I'm a lead pastor.
Oh, yeah. I'm a bona fide pastor now down here in South Carolina. Anyway. No, but seriously, we moved into that space, and that just group doesn't seem to exist in our space as much, or at least I haven't found it.
Yeah. It seems like everything online is geared toward older churches trying to be cool, I guess, is a terrible way of saying that. But
which, I mean, that's fine. But there's not a whole lot of us talking about, hey, this is practically how life is. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. Yeah. And I think that sometimes I want to be able just to drop in a group, and I don't want my theology to necessarily get in the way of us actually having conversation. Now, granted, we know there's close-handed and open-handed theology, some stuff we're not going to budge on, but there are certain things we can learn if we cut through that. And that's really why we're wanting to move into this space and have these kind of conversations.
Yeah, can I just drop something that's going to immediately cause a problem in that kind of clarity?
Go ahead.
So what I've learned in this COVID thing is that theology is getting in the way of how we love people. And that's not to say theology is bad or not important, but I know that there are people who have they heard that and already built that defense. Theology is important. Yeah, I'm not getting away from that at all. I think that's incredibly important. And I know, me, but like I said, I'm not that important. So 99% of the people here outside of Frank Gill, what's up, Frank? Miss you, buddy. Have any idea who I am? But I think what I've realized is that when people are hurting and scared and fearful, we don't need to help them understand what your epistemology is at the time. We need to find a way to point them toward Jesus and love them as Jesus loved them. And you can get in conversation like, well, that's where theology comes in. And I get that. But man, we spend so much time on podcasts and on groups and Facebook groups and all this nonsense. We want to yell and scream about our theology, and what's happening is the world around us is dying, and we're arguing about whether we should have communion or whether we should serve people or have open church or closed church or masks or not, or whether it's the mark of the beast. And people are dying around us, and we are in our little huddles arguing about theology because that's comfortable to us. Yeah. Instead of the uncomfortable nature of going out and caring for people and making disciples. And it drives me nuts. So
I think that's fair. I mean, I guess the question, and we can yank this out of the podcast if you don't want to go there, but do you want to talk about how you just super felt that in ministry?
Sure, yeah.
I mean,
I'm wide open.
Oh, God. Oh, man, Sean, I like it. All right. Well, hey, yeah, I mean, because I know that's real with you. I think it's so easy for us to be like, yeah, it's theology and practice, but when that reality hits you in the face, like it has hit you in the face, it changes things. So I mean, how's it dealing when that hits you in the face? Man,
it's a lot. There's a lot of backstory that it'd take too long to get into. But it's funny that the things we used to make fun, like in our Charleston Southern classes, in our Bible college classes, things we used to argue about, and make fun of, about how stupid they were, are now showing up in a new generation of argument. I remember, we'd always talk about how churches would fall apart because people would argue about the color of the carpet, or you talk about worship wars. And what I've realized is that is just as prevalent now as it ever was, because everything is so polarized. Everything is so angry, I guess is an okay way to say that we are fighting wars over battles that don't need to be fought. And it's driving people out of the church. And my concern, and what I want to be about, what I want our church to be about, is a place where people who have gotten tired of those conversations, who have gotten tired of politics in church, who have gotten tired of nonsense, can be brought back into the fold. Because I think there's a lot of people at our church who are at our church because we don't get up and talk about politics and voting conservative. And they don't know where I stand or where I don't. But the reality is that's not something we need to be arguing about in church right now. Whether face masks are important, does not need to be a political / theological stance. And so we've had people who, would rather tear other churches down, other pastors down, other whatever groups of people down to feel good and to sound good. And like I said, meanwhile, while people are just dying spiritually and physically, but while they're just dying, and we're driving generations out of the church, and we're thinking it's a problem that was 15 years ago that still exists. But what I'm seeing is that it's a mass exodus now, like a new exodus, and it's a totally different group of people that are now also leaving the church.
Yeah, and I mean, we're even seeing it really amongst even the young ministers, the guys who are really just coming out of school. And I think that's when I called you the other day, man, you hit me with some news about even what happened with your own staff here. Mm-hmm. And let me get this right, because I think I heard this right. It was over the song, I'm going to See the Victory.
See a Victory.
Elevation. See a Victory. You lost 2 staff members over that?
Mm-hmm. 2, yeah.
I mean,
2 with a kind of connected third, but really, 2. Yep. Well, it's the same aspect of we would rather tear down pastors, and I don't know how deep we want to get into this, but like Stephen Furtick, I know people love him, hate him, and I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe I would have been in a camp where I would have wanted to have a valued opinion about that, of like why he said this wrong and he said this wrong. And I think I'm just over, like, if you can give me a solid theology of this is who God is, this is what the Bible is, this is who Jesus is, and it fits, I'm not going to discount you for something you might have said in a 1.5-minute clip online that makes you look stupid. Because I've been in ministry, 15 years, but I've said stupid stuff in the last 2.5 years because I was unhealthy, or because I was tired, or because I just had a tongue twist. And if people would have taken a 1.5-minute clip out of that, they probably would have hung me to dry as well. And, listen, I don't want to go be part of a team where I just see infighting and where everyone's against each other. And the commonality that we see in churches now is like, well, if I tear that church over there down, it'll make me look better, or it'll give me the opportunity to say like, hey, yeah, church sucks, but we suck less than they do, so come to our church. So it's all selfish. Yeah. Like it's all building your own kingdom. And I think like, man, if we can put that aside and we can sing a song that is biblically accurate, that's theologically beautiful, and that brings people to a place where they have a moment with the Lord, like why in the world would we get mad and leave churches and get angry and leave churches about that? And I think what's going to happen is this young generation, this college age, seminary age guys, if they don't get off of their high horses, if they don't desire humility as much as they do martyrdom, then what's going to happen is 10 years from now, they're either going to have to repent, or they're going to be at home angry reading the Bible for themselves because there's no church that is the way that they think they should be. And that's just not relationship. Like my wife loves me in the moments where I, go paint the house on a weekend, and in the moments where I leave my socks in the middle of the den, which drives her crazy that I just do for some reason. And I think we have to get to that level with church as well. Like if you're looking for the perfect church, it doesn't exist. And you have to stop being so angry and discounting each other so that you can sound really theological cute on Facebook. I'm sick of that. And if you're, listening to this and you're a young pastor and you're fighting me in that, then I would love for you to come and talk to some folks at my church who left church because they were so tired of that attitude and arrogance. And I'm just going to say this. It totally lacks the heart of Jesus, which totally lacks the heart of the gospel.
Disclaimer, 2 guys sitting at a table, admittedly, we have been those people.
Yeah, that's what I said 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that was me.
Fun story. Sean Gajda, first time I'm hanging out with you. All right, I'm sure we hung out beforehand, but I think I've told you this before, the first conversation I ever remember having with you was you telling me how you got kicked off Bob Jones's campus.
I did, yeah. This is a recurring theme in my life, I'm realizing. I got kicked off of Bob Jones campus.
Well, I mean, I can't remember exactly what you were doing. What were you doing?
Here, man, no one's ever I'm going to be labeled all kinds of terrible things after this. 10 years from now, when this is like the 3rd biggest podcast, and they go back, like, I'm going to start at the front, they're going to hear this and be like, oh my gosh.
001. If people ever go back, they're going to go to the first one.
Yeah, here we are.
The conversations. Anyways, you got
Yeah, so I was at North Greenville as a student, and I had a waffle, like, the waffle sweaters everybody used to have. Yeah. I had one that said Abercrombie on the front. And I just wore it because it was comfortable. And I went into the library and they said, hey, you have to leave. And I said, I'm not. Why? Like, they said, well, your shirt. I said, you can either take the shirt off or you can leave. And so I got really angry, and I don't remember exactly what I said or did, but I remember telling them, if I do this, I'm taking off everything. And yeah, so that went really well. Bob Jones, I threatened nudity I was an idiot. And so the next day, some friends who I won't name, but some prominent pastors actually in America, and I went to Bob Jones and we soaped their fountain. Oh, and it wasn't good. It was, it was sinful. Like, don't do that. Don't see it as, it's not glorifying. But that was my mentality then, because I was angry. And
so when you talk to the younger person, we're kind of talking to me and you, younger.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in that same vein then, because I do know in practically pastoring that there are younger pastors who are listening to this, some who may still be even in the Bible college era or even struggling through the call. Can you what would you say a North Star is?
Oh man, huge. Even if you don't feel like you are this way, because you might not be, but just do this. Instead of, when you get into a conversation with someone, instead of going, here's what I know, you need to sit down, look at them and say, help me understand what I don't. Because nobody cares what you just learned in your class and that you just learned how to do hermeneutics. No one cares that you can quote half of Romans 8. What makes a pastor, instead of someone who just has Bible knowledge, is that they can look at someone and know that they can learn something, know that they can observe something, and know that they can have a relationship with someone. And so if you go into a conversation and your throw is, hey, I'm going to flex and I'm going to show them how knowledgeable I am, bro, the only time I see that in Scripture are the Pharisees. I don't see that in the heart of Jesus at all. I see that in the heart of the Pharisees. And we are, my goal would be to break us out of a Pharisee heart before it takes hold, because it's going to damage the church. And in saying you and I had to do that, I had to go back and I wrote 4 letters when I moved into the lead pastor role. And one of them was to my pastor at my very first church in Hanahan, South Carolina. And I just told him I was sorry. Because although I didn't agree with a lot of what he did, and I think he made bad decisions, there's a lot of kids that come out of seminary, and I was a kid, so I can say that. Seminary and Bible college, we think, man, like, if he would just turn the reins over, I could do better. I would fix this, and I would fix that. And what I would tell you is there's so much for you to learn, because you don't, and it's impossible for you to know the weight of lead pastorship and of ministry in general. So instead of going and getting on Facebook and arguing with what you do know, man, like, look at the person and ask them what you don't, ask them what you can learn, because you'd be amazed at how disarming that can be for people who are angry and hurt, and you can get to the core of what they're actually hurt on. They don't want to argue Bible with you. They just want to be heard and cared for. And I've had some incredible conversations by just looking to people and saying, like, hey, how can I help? Like, what did you experience? And then speak to the experience instead.
And that whole process, and I know everyone listening, like, you're in there with us, that doesn't end. Like, the process of us shaking out this I'm important. That's why we were talking on the front end about you being important, and the obvious thing is, like, in light of Christ, like, who are we? In
light of TR, who am I? I mean, genuinely, like.
Yeah. And you need friends in your life who will just tell you that. And that's when I said I'm here with you, because you'll be honest. Because I can think of about 5 statements that truly wrecked my life. And Sean Gajda, one of your statements is in that. I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of people who Sean Gajda has put that statement out. But, mine was when I was interviewing to come to Alice Drive. Yep. And I was super not wanting to, because I was living in Newberry, South Carolina. And it was nice. I had 7 years there. There was not another youth pastor in all of town. So, like, how do you screw up if you're the only one? Like, here's the deal. If you hate McDonald's, but you're in a town and the only fast food is McDonald's.
You're eating double cheeseburgers.
Yeah. I mean, so here I am, we got a student ministry going on, and I'm really struggling through a call. And I remember I rolled out all the stuff to you. I was in the library of Newberry in South Carolina. I rolled out everything to you, and as I was expecting you to be like, well, just pray about it, because that's what good preachers would say. You know what you told me.
I'm not a good preacher.
You know what you told me.
I do, yeah.
What did you tell me?
Newberry doesn't need you.
just setting that.
Yeah.
Newberry, it doesn't need me. And so then I can't tell you how happy I was to oblige you to that same statement.
It did come right back
when
around.
you called me and was like, "Hey, I'm thinking of moving up to TR, but I'm in Greenville. Doesn't need you."
Yeah.
But I think, man, and the reason I tell you that statement, what you told me is so big to me. It's not really as much of it moved me from here to there. That's actually a statement that's just carried with me. Like, I wake up every day knowing that, God has a plan. I'm really not gonna mess up his plan. My job's to like get in sync with what he's doing. But the people around me, when they have God, they have his plan. They don't need me. It's a blessing to be used. And I think sometimes as pastors, man, I don't know about you, but it is easy for us to get into these people need me feeling. I mean, especially in COVID, right?
Absolutely.
Like with the anxiety, like we need you, and you feel that, but then you get on the other side of it. I'm like, no. And so what we end up doing is we start like putting all our eggs in these baskets called people. I'll tell you, this is something I've learned in the last few months, and maybe this is your experience. So I stepped out of student ministry. And one of the things I've realized being on this side of it, and I do know that a lot of people who listen to this are guys who are in that place where they're stepping out of it, not as a stepping stone, but as a transition in life. I'm going to tell you what hit me very hard, and that is this. When you're a student pastor, there's a reason it's in was it the top 5 most rewarding jobs in America, like statistically?
Yeah, it's number 2, I think.
It's after
being a doctor or something?
Yeah, saving people's physical lives.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so this is going to sound really selfish, but I was one for 15 years. It's a dopamine drip, man.
Yeah.
You have these teenagers who, the most formidable years of their life, making the biggest decisions they can, and you're along for the ride, and you're a big buddy Sean, who's like awesomest guy in town, and he's your friend, and man, he led me to Jesus, he's discipling me, and it's this constant dopamine drip. And as soon as they go to high school, it's okay because I got new ones coming in. And like, I know that sounds super self-serving, but on a very real level, it's a dopamine drip. And then when you transition to pastoral ministry, that line is cut.
Gone. Well, I think the reason is because, especially in student ministry, it's easy to have a misplacement of the value of your own identity, because, whether you were cool in high school or not, just by being the youth pastor, typically like you're pretty cool all of a sudden. And so it's a moment where we feel like, oh, I've arrived and like, look how great I am. And it always the crash and burn happens because our identity is in like what we think we are portrayed by the people and our value in that. And here's the reality that also carries into pastoral leadership, because for the same reason everybody listens to Matt Chandler or Stephen Furtick or J.D. Greer or whoever, because we're like, man, I want to be that influential. And like, here's the problem with that, man. Like, God hasn't called you to that. Like, that's not your ministry to have. And it's not all the bells and roses and whistles that you think it is either. And so when we try to build these kingdoms up and find our identity in other people still, instead of who Jesus says we are, like if Jesus says your identity is in being like, for us, like a pastor of a small church in Travelers Rest, then that is just as valuable as if you're Matt Chandler in Dallas, Texas. And it's just as valuable as if you're, Joe whoever in Indonesia. It's just that's the issue we have, is that we don't desire Jesus, we desire platforms. And when you're in student ministry and like successful student ministry, which I think we both can say that we have been in, the Lord's really blessed all those things. Is it's easy to see the platform and think like, well, because my platform is growing, that means I'm being successful in ministry, which means I'm a better Christian or a better leader or a better pastor. I mean, some of the greatest pastors I know have been volunteers I've had who all they do is like love and pray for and weep over the kids that they have the opportunity to be with, because they find such value in those moments. And so I think the deal with that, whether you're a Matt Chandler or a Sean or Delmar or Joe, whoever that's in Indonesia, like the reality of that is that's not the platform you've been given. So you don't need to desire that platform. And that shouldn't be what your goal is. Your goal as a leader and as a pastor is to love people well. And here's the other thing. Like, we want those platforms though, but the reality is, like, if I just took over a church when I was 25, right? And if the Lord was like, yes, you're going to lead this little Baptist church, I had no preparation for that. Like if you go back and even read the Old Testament, read any of the Bible, like there's preparation that happens before God allows these big moments to happen. Like Peter messed up, dude. Peter messed up bad multiple times before he ever had the opportunity to go and deliver the sermon at Pentecost. When you see these Old Testament prophets, go look at the story of Jonah. Jonah went to a place he did not want to go and had to preach a sermon he didn't want to preach to people he didn't love so that God would do what God wanted to do. And then was still mad about it at the end. So yeah, it sounds great for us to have 10,000 views on YouTube and to give these incredible sermons and people want to listen to us. Like that's good for our flesh. It's good for what we think we want to be. But the reality is we need to be not even good or comfortable. We need to be excited and enthralled with the place that God has us when he has us there. Because if we aren't, then we're going to burn out and fall out of ministry. And we're going to blame God and everyone else instead of realizing that maybe we needed to look at ourselves and look across the table at somebody who's been in ministry for 45 years and go, hey, what do you see? Tell me what I can learn.
I think that's a big thing, man. When I sit across pastors, and like I said, I'm a campus pastor, so I have a senior pastor. When I hear him talk, man, and he's got tenure over me, like a couple decades, I'm still like, how does this guy know to ask these questions?
Yeah.
Like, how does he know? You ever sit around other pastors? And I think it's really weird because you're a senior pastor and there's an expectation that you know it all. Mm-hmm. But right now, what I'm learning, even when I talk with my senior pastor, for the first time I can think of in my life, every pastor, from the mega church to me and you, we're all asking the same question. And that really is this, like, how do you even know if you're doing it well? Because let's be honest, we had all those traditional markers, right? Like how many butts are in your seats on Sunday, right? And then you have the tithe benchmark, which in some churches it hasn't, but then in some churches it has. But the only reason it has is because half the congregation lost their job. So does that mean that they're not really dug in? I don't know. Like the measurements we used to have, community engagement, those are kind of out the window. So I guess I'm asking you a question that we're all working through and processing together. And I've been asking every pastor I know this question, trying to see if there's some common themes. But, when it comes to pastoring well, where do you even go to hang that hat right now?
Man, that's a big question. I think what I've seen when I talk to other pastors and even investigating my own heart is the success of a church in COVID time is when you are seeking the Holy Spirit and doing things that are different, not to be different, but because that's what the Holy Spirit is leading you to do rather than copying what everyone else does. I'm a big football fan, and so they say NFL is copy culture. Somebody gets successful, so every team tries to do what they do, and they're always 2 years behind. We have to be a force and a power for good in the world where it's not just simply, hey, I copied these 6 really good ideas and I made it happen at our church, because church can't be a formula. Because here's the reality, man. Like the way that the Holy Spirit's going to call you to lead in Sumter with a major military background, and going to call me to lead in Travelers Rest, where it's it's people who've been here forever, and then this huge population that's moving in and kind of granola is going to be different than someone in a major city, than someone in Florida, because it's a different environment, and you can't simply take what you see work in other cities and apply it to where you're at, because that is nonsense, and that is not actually following the Spirit of the Lord into what he's called you to lead in, because you're just leading the way that he's called someone else or 6 other people to lead. And so it's never going to be effective.
Yeah, I mean, every pastor he's made for his own place. Like I will never lead man bun culture like you, Sean. I just can't, man. Like,
I just want to be clear. I don't have a man bun.
No, Sean does not have a man bun. I would pay money to have any kind of bun right now. I'm wearing a
You're
hat.
beautiful in other ways.
Growing up, I listened to Shane and Shane all the time. And Shane, if you ever hear this, man, your music rocked my world. So but I one day I saw Shane take his hat off, and I was like, oh, that's why he wears a hat. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's kind of messed up. And now I have assumed his posture with the hat, and I totally get it. It's like, why would I not wear a hat? But
hey, listen, I'm going gray, like especially on my sides here.
That looks cool though.
Well, that's because Proverbs says that gray hair is a crown of wisdom and splendor. So that's kind of where I don't know what it says. Well, you can go 2 Kings with Elijah going up with you bald head and cast down curses, you know.
It's going to be nice and polished. So, all right, really quick. Truth or dare?
True, always truth.
Oh, you're going to go truth? Okay.
You
Man.
said on the front of the podcast, like, honesty is
Your
my
honesty,
policy.
but oh man, but even the dare. Well, actually,
Let's do both.
Well, the dare was going to make you lie, so I don't even know.
Oh, okay.
Okay, no. Okay, let's do this. Let's do both. Let's do the dare first. Okay. All right, the dare. I want you. You're a huge Cleveland Browns fan, right?
Huge.
Like on a scale from 1 to 10.
All 100.
Like that. Okay. I want you to give me a solid pitch of why you should not be a Cleveland Brown fan. Like a genuine salesman. Stop loving Cleveland's Brown, so I can have an audio bite out of context.
Yeah, because it's hard to follow a team that for the last decade is statistically the worst team in the NFL, and that if it was English soccer or Premier League soccer, we would have been relegated twice to lower leagues because the talent levels weren't there. Because outside of the last 2 years, we had 2 full calendar years where we went 1-31. Including a full year of losing. And statistically, it's an anomaly to be as bad as the Browns have been. There's more empirical statistical evidence that we should never have had 2 seasons like we had, because at some point, it's kind of the idea that enough loads of laundry have been in the dryer that statistically it should come out one day where all your clothes are folded just because of the math. Yeah, the math. That the Browns never should have been able to be as bad as they actually were. They were a statistical anomaly for the last 20 years.
What? So what I'm actually hearing you say?
They're terrible. Now they're not anymore, but they were terrible.
You were saying, but if they were terrible, they were at least the best at being terrible.
The best at being terrible. Yeah. So they came back in '99, and I've either been to or watched every single minute live. That 1-31 season, I went to 3 of those games. Yeah.
Are you their bad luck charm?
I am going to be honest. I've thought about that.
And you in all honesty, sports is not my. How would you rate me as sports from 1 to 100?
-60.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. It's not that I hate sports. I just think there are lots of other things better.
That's why you're a better pastor than me. Because
like
Sunday,
knitting,
Sunday you're okay with just doing church all day.
If I knit, I at least have a product at the end, right?
Yeah. No, I hear you.
No, okay.
And it's much cheaper.
It's very true.
Much more cost effective.
Well, all right. That's why I'm like truth or dare. Dares don't really hurt you because even your dares are like you don't mind being brutally honest. Okay, well then here's your truth then. All right. What's the one phrase that you've uttered to yourself or either to anybody else or even in your head in the last year that you never thought you would have told yourself as a pastor?
Man. That's going to hurt a little bit, but it's necessary. That I not only misheard God, but that I put on a good enough charade that I convinced everyone I know to tell me that it was a good idea to be a lead pastor. That was a really hard moment.
What brought that?
A lot of pain. Not being successful in the church world. Listen, Del, I guess I'll just say this. Because I know a lot of guys who want to plant churches, and there's a romanticized call to planting churches. But where the rubber meets the road of if you are called and if you're doing the right thing, I had 13. So when we tithe, we get an email every time we tithe, right? It says, thank you for participating with our church. Last summer, out of 16 weeks, I had 13 emails that said, we can't process your tithe because there's not enough in your bank account to process. And after you put everything you have into a church, give everything you have and sacrifice everything for a church, when you experience that over and over and over again, and my prayers were consistently, God, just shut it down. God, just speak, tell me, give me something else to do. I didn't have anything else to do, and God wouldn't let me. Every time I tried to do something that would be a really good reason for quitting, like the Lord wouldn't allow me to, or something would come up, or That's another whole story. Planning a church is incredibly challenging and incredibly hard, and it's going to take everything out of you. But the Lord is so good in that He builds it all back up. And for me, I was stubborn, and I had to be stripped down to that point. I think I had to be stripped down to that point to where it was just studs, so the Lord could build it back up the way He wanted to. And that was a long couple months where it really tested. Hey, did I mess up? And I'd go back and think like, these people who I love and who I value, who I know walk closely with Jesus, who love me, but who love the Lord more. I remember thinking like, did they just mishear? Did I present this in a way that I was hoping they would say yes to? Or, it was tough. And I know we talked last summer even, and this is a little bit behind the Wizard's curtain, I guess, but I remember telling you, like, if something doesn't shift, I'm done forever with ministry. And I remember you said, that's something I never thought I'd ever hear you say. Like, that's shocking for me to hear. And I remember thinking, like, why? That shouldn't be shocking. Like, this is my reality, And so it's really hard when you come to a point where you feel like you're ready to give up. And in that honest moment of really asking the Lord, like, and one of the most honest prayers I've ever prayed was, did I miss this? Like, am I wasting people's money and their time? Like, am I going to shut this church down and then be another reason that so many people who come are all quitting and get mad at church? And so that was I mean, everyone doubts ministry, right? Like, everyone does. But I think I was at a point where I was sure that not only I'd misheard God, but every single person in my life had as well, who told me this is the right thing, go do this thing. And I really believe it's because, like, as the Lord is building our church up, and as I think He's going to continue to be, that if I didn't have that moment, I would have thought that maybe I did something to make this thing happen. And I think that what I'm learning is, and I'm not there yet, but what I'm learning is that I think that those months where my kids were young enough to not really understand what was happening, where my wife is a woman of grace and could hold me up in ways that she'd never had to in our marriage, I think is because when our church grows and takes off and whatever the Lord does, I need to have those moments to remember so that I can know it's never about me, because I see so many pastors who are cocky and arrogant and think that, they built this thing up. And I know that no matter what happens, if the Lord shuts Trailside down tomorrow, or if Trailside blows up and is a place where I can love other pastors who were like I was 10 years ago, when they're ready to give up, I can look and go, listen, like, let me tell you about what the Lord did. It will be with the understanding that I didn't do any of this. That this is like, He tore me down to these studs so that when this happened, when we saw this life change, when the church grew and when chains are being broken and when things were happening that were just blowing people's minds, when eternity was filling up, and it's happening at our church, it has nothing to do with who's on the front end talking. It has everything to do with us being willing to say, when we were eating hot dog sandwiches, because that's all we had, that it is acknowledgement that the Lord's goodness and grace is what got us here, and that is what carried us here, and that as He can build it up, He can tear it down. And He doesn't need me. But He chooses to use me. He chooses to bless our family. He chooses to allow us to be a part of that. And so I'm hoping that's why we experienced that. But I know what it's like to be on the edge and to be ready to quit. And I don't want to be there ever again.
I think that super real thing is, if we're going to be honest, man, that's super real for a lot of pastors, like, right now.
Yeah.
I look at it like, what if last year for you wasn't last year, but what if that was this year? Like, if you were in the middle of that plus COVID.
There's a lot of churches that are.
Yeah.
There are churches that are shutting down because they have nothing left. I think if you're listening to this, one thing I want you to know is that the world needs you. And that, listen, if it needs you and it's not in a pastoral place, that's okay. But it needs you. And I didn't know that last year. I was ready for it not to have me anymore. And so the world needs you, and you're not alone. And if you're at that place, reach out. I almost cuss on the podcast.
Oh, I got this bleep button right here.
That's good. That's good. You know, you can email me. You can reach out to me, and I'll be there with you and for you.
Sean, man, thank you for the honesty. And I think for me, this is why we have to have these conversations. Because you are not the only one experiencing that. I think on some level we all are.
But that's what Satan uses, right? Because that's what was in my head.
Oh, yeah.
I was the only one.
Oh, you did. He did. Like, I woke up this week, and like it's a conversation, but I woke up this week, and somebody goes, how's it like being a campus pastor? And I said, well, I took us from 170 to 40 in 6 months, because of just the environment and everything going on right now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why we need these podcasts, because right now what I've seen in a lot of spaces is the really good pastors who we would put up and say, I want to be like that preacher. They have podcasts too. And honestly, their podcasts are really good.
Oh, yeah. Well produced and everything.
Well produced. And honestly, I listen to them. I've benefited from their ministry. But if I'm going to be like exceptionally honest, their podcasts generally aren't pastor podcasts. They are leadership podcasts.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is so attractional. I mean, I do. I get it. That's a tangible thing that someone outside the church world can also gravitate toward. But I think right now, like every leadership podcast I'm listening to, it's the same people saying, we've not been through this. Here's 5 things you can try that we're trying. And I think we just have to be honest sometimes and say, listen, no, it's about us having a conversation that's going in the same direction. So, I mean, when it comes to it, this isn't per se that leadership 15 different ways. This is how we're experiencing this in our ministry.
Yeah. So, hey, young pastors, I'm gonna share a piece of advice that I got from a 70-year-old pastor that wrecked me. He said, when you're talking about church leadership, stop trying to find yourself at the front of the line and find yourself behind the rabbi. And I remember thinking, like, man, I remember thinking I wanted that opportunity to be the front end so people would listen to me and they didn't want to know what I was doing. But when I found that's a heavy weight to bear, and what I needed was to be behind the rabbi walking in his dust and finding what he was leading me to do. And so the best place you can be for your church, the best place you can be for your family, the best place you can be for you is to have a time every single day where you are on your knees before your Father. Because if not, you're trying to lead from the back and you'll never be able to do it effectively. And you'll think that leadership podcasts and sermons where it's 4 steps to a great marriage are going to be what helps and heals you. And what you need is you need to follow Jesus so that you can love your wife like he loved the church. You need to lead your church in a way that you're called to, in a way that Jesus sacrificed himself for it. You need to lead your kids in a way that they're looking for a father who calls them into the throne room and shows them grace and mercy in their time of need. You need to be that. And you can only do that if you're following Jesus before you follow Matt Chandler or Stephen Furtick or either one of us. And that's where we need to find ourselves first.
Which is kind of antithesis to our culture right now.
100%.
I mean, everything about our culture is, let's make big out of me, which is really weird because we were talking about this earlier, this great divide in our culture where it's either all about the collective or it's all about the individual. And what I think I hear you saying is neither. It's about our posture behind the king.
Yeah. Yep.
If you build your platform, it's going to be real shaky. And when it falls down, it's going to fall down hard. And church is not built on a bunch of little worker ants coming up and sacrificing their bodies to make your hill big. A church is built on a pastor and a caretaker who will go with the little ants and the big ants and the queen ants and everyone else and walk alongside them and help them build what God has called them to build. You are an equipper and a lover and a care bearer, whatever it is, care bearer. Someone who's supposed to walk with the people you've been assigned, who cares for the flock. You're not the one who stands on top of them and says, look how great we are.
Admittedly, though, I'm sitting across the table from somebody who, in my opinion, like Sean, like lots of people follow you. I mean, I'm not going to, I know, I see your heart.
You must be seeing something different than
Dude,
I am.
Okay. For those of you who are listening right now, I'm not even going to lie. I went to walk through downtown Greenville. We were walking to this coffee shop. He's like, hey, what's the girl's name? I don't know. Just like, I don't know. And then we walked to another shop. Hey, see, that's the thing about you. You don't even feel it. And I think I can't help but see, and that's kind of a new thing that I've seen in you, even in the last year, is maybe it is some of that humbling that you received last year. That's why you're not feeling it. Because I think a lot of pastors who are listening right now, they're hearing everything we're saying about, listen, grow where you're planted. Don't try to be the mega church down the road. But a lot of us are also very much, I mean, we're going to call it what it is. It's a performance-driven thing, because go and make disciples in all nations. How do we, it's really tough striking that balance between growing where we're planting and also being like, but I'm also called to grow. That growing is such a fine line between performance and, not, and actually just being obedient.
Can I give you two things that I think we all need to do better? One, we need to sacrifice our platform. Get on your knees, pray, and ask God to help you stop loving the platform, because that's a big key for us. For me, I think I had to get to a point where my platform wasn't that great, and where there was nothing. It was just studs. And the second thing is, if you want to know what makes a great pastor great, this is going to sound weird, but go read Bob Goff. Go read Love Does. Go read Everybody Always, because that is the heart of a pastor. Be willing to do stuff like put your cell phone in the back of a book that sells 30 million copies. Do crazy stuff like that, and be willing to love people where they are in ways that you never thought possible, and then watch the church grow, and then go feel fulfilled. Find a relationship with people because they matter, because God says they matter, not because they can give something to you or offer you something or play a good guitar in your band, or go and just love people because they're making you coffee on a Tuesday morning, and that's what they do, and that they are there to serve others, and that they're worthy of you looking at them and saying, hey, how are you? And meaning it. Find hope in the homeless guy on the side of the road who wants a free coffee just as much as you would as a person who's going to come to your church and write a big check. And treat them the same way because God says to. Not because culture says to. Not go and find people and love them simply because they matter to God.
I think it's one thing. It's just it's kind of like food, right? For people who struggle with eating, it's like you got to eat. But daggone it, I wish it didn't taste so good. Yeah. It's like being a preacher. You got to be on this platform. Man, I wish it didn't taste so good all the time. So, but speaking of which, we're going to get out of here because I think we're about to go taste some good food or some stuff. And knowing you, there's probably going to be somebody there that I would guarantee it.
We'll come back and circle around in the comment section later. And it'll be no, definitely not.
Well, it has been good talking. If you do have anything you do want to hit up with us more, please check us out in our Facebook group.
Yeah, and my heart is just pressing hard right now on this. So if you are a pastor and you're struggling and you need anything, even someone to listen to or whatever, my phone number is 864-979-4802. And my email is sean@trailside.church, because I want to be about what we say we're about. And so if I don't answer, leave a message and I'll call you. I text. You're not alone. And man, we're in this together, no matter if you're a church of 10,000 or a church of 10. And man, I'm here with you. So
peace out.